Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Will you please welcome to HFM the one and only Mr. Peter Cox.
Out of Go West.
Good evening, Peter. How are you?
Hi.
I'm very well, thanks. How are you both?
Very well indeed. Now, where shall we start? I'd like to take you back to the very early days when you first met Richard Drummy.
Yep.
Can you tell us how the band started and how you started writing together?
Sure. We were both in what we used to call pub bands back then, hugely influenced by the band Free, Paul Rogers, Paul Kossoff and so on. And I read a review of Richard's band in the local newspaper. They were obviously our local competition, so I went along to see what they were all about and had a chat with Richard, gave him my band's demo tape, and one thing led to another, and we became friends. Really just kind of listening to music and drinking beer and, you know, that kind of thing that you do when you're teenagers. And then I got my first so-called professional gig, using the term loosely, working for Mecca in Tiffany's in Sheffield. And Richard would schlep up and down the motorway occasionally on the weekend and bring up music that he'd bought and movies that he'd seen. And that was around the time that we started writing together. Richard had a little Porter studio and a bass, and I was playing guitar, and we fooled around and wrote a couple of tunes, and that was the beginning.
Nice one.
I would like to ask you, Peter, when We Close Our Eyes came out with the video, it was never off the telly, off our music channel anyway. That's how long Stu and I have been together. And the video made such an impact that the viewers, the listeners, actually had a chance to hear the song because they were watching the video so much. Then they appreciated you. Were you surprised by that?
Well, it was, as you can imagine, it was all completely new to me. We made our entire first album for less than that video cost, which will give you an idea of the promotional priorities of the time. But certainly before we made that first Go West album, the label had a very good idea, which was to take Richard and myself to Los Angeles for a week, confirming that we finally had a record deal after a long time of trying. And MTV in the US was in its infancy at the time, and so we were seeing music video television for the first time, really, giving us an idea of the power of it, and spending time in America for the first time in Los Angeles, going to see local bands and getting excited about the prospect of making our own record. So when it came time to make that video, as I say, I was kind of, to some extent, going where I was told and doing what I was told. But the directors of the video were Kevin Godley and Lol Cream from 10cc. They were red-hot video directors at the time, so much so that normally video directors would be required to provide a storyboard showing what the video was ultimately going to look like and what was going to happen. Godley and Cream were not required to do that. The record labels would approach them. They would say either yes or no. They would give them a bill, and the record label would say, yeah, okay, we'll spend that much money, which they did in our case. So certainly from the point of view of being the focus of a music video, it was all completely new territory to me, and I didn't really think too much about whether or not what they were doing and what I was doing was going to have the required effect. But as you say, partly, I suppose, because of their reputation and partly because of the visual image that they came up with, that video did get played an awful lot, both in America and in the UK, and it did the job of attracting people's attention, announcing us on the world stage, if that doesn't sound too grand, and it was entirely successful.
Well, it certainly worked, because guess what the first CD we ever bought when we got our first CD player was?
Well, I'd like to hope it was our album.
It was Bangs and Crashes.
It was Bangs
and Crashes. That was our first ever CD. We were amazed by the wonder of technology.
Yes, it was a technical sounding record, wasn't it? But I've got to say that one of the joys of having had some success in the days when those 12, I don't know really, if 12 inches or extended mixes are quite such a big thing. I'm not really in tune with what's happening in the dance world at the moment. But back then, you know, the so-called 12-inch single was quite a big deal, and we were listening to other people's work thinking, well, it seems to be the beginning of the 7-inch, and then 64 bars of drums, and then the end and the fade. So we wanted to do something more adventurous than that, and because we had had some success, and because we were kind of a self-contained recording unit, the label just gave us free rein to go into the studio and make our own extended mixes, which meant that we could do more recording and hopefully make those extended mixes more interesting.
It was another fine album, Peter. Now, I'd like to take you back to when Kendall and I first saw you. We were pretty lucky to see you, actually. We saw you twice at Hammersmith Odeon, I believe. Yeah. The lineup of the band, which never failed to impress me, such names as Pino Palladino, Tony Beard on drums, and the legend that was Alan Murphy on guitar. What was it like playing with these guys?
Well, as you say, absolutely awesome. You know, Alan was such a lovely man, sadly missed. And
Very
standing next to him on stage, it was just super exciting and therefore inspirational. And Tony was, you know, in some ways typical for a drummer, always impatient, never understanding why everything took so long, just wanted to play. But having said that, he was not like any other drummer in almost any other way. Certainly, if anyone ever saw the Tube appearance where we played a song from our first album called SOS, and Tony decided to change the accent of the beat on the intro, and Richard and I are both looking at him going, where's one? Hoping that we would come in at the right time. I mean, you know, just Tony is a fantastic drummer, and Pino, obviously a world-class bass player. We were lucky enough to have come along and join and give us his input on the first record. So, you know, we just felt extremely fortunate and excited every night to be on a stage with those guys. It was just, you know, like for us, having spent, as I say, the formative part of our friendship listening to music and poring over album notes and seeing which players we liked, and often, though it might sound crazy now, seeking out records with a certain bass player on it and buying the records simply because of that player's appearance. You know, for us, it was a dream come true to be on the stage with these guys.
That's brilliant. Now, what was I going to ask you? Yes, at Hammersmith, two songs that you did that I remember very, very clearly. Hideaway and Time Heals.
Yeah.
Please tell me why.
Well, simply because Richard is probably the chairman of the Todd Rundgren fan club, and you know, he's just a huge fan of Todd Rundgren, and our players were open to listening to and arranging those songs. And you know, I mean, obviously, my own listening was influenced largely by Richard around that time, because he did have an extensive record collection, and the nature of that listening relationship is that he would say to me, listen to this, it's great, it's great. And so up until then, I know I've already mentioned Free and the bands that came from Free, Bad Company and the Andy Fraser Band and so on. That was quite... I had quite a narrow field of listening, and Richard was introducing me to the Doobie Brothers and, you know, West Coast American music and a lot of much more keyboard-oriented music. And within that, he was playing me all his Todd Rundgren records and saying, you know, this guy's a genius. And so that's how we came to play those songs on the live show.
Well, we both love Todd. Hard voice to take on. I think you did a very good job on it, Peter.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I've got to say, actually, now you mention that, with those Todd Rundgren songs in the early Go West live show, and later we covered a song by Bobby Caldwell called What You Won't Do for Love. And I think that I would have been more daunted by taking on those vocal performances if I'd been more familiar with the artist. I didn't know, for instance, how successful Bobby Caldwell had been, particularly in America, with What You Won't Do for Love. Had I known that, I might have been a bit more wary of taking the song on. But I agree with you, Todd has got an awesome voice, and anyone who enjoys Daryl Hall, you know, could give themselves a treat by, you know, investigating Todd's back catalogue, because certainly there seemed to me to be strong similarities, and I'm sure that Todd was a huge influence on Daryl Hall.
Peter, I must ask you this. Are you aware that your eyebrows are attached to your vocal cords somehow, and that your eyebrows do every note perfectly as it goes up and down?
I'm afraid I'm fully aware of that, yes.
I think it's fantastic.
It's not an enjoyable experience to see yourself on YouTube or even on TV, you know, with this phenomenon going on. But I've got to tell you that I started my my singing career as a member of the school choir. You know, it's kind of like the white boys' alternative to a gospel music background for black singers, and that's where my initial vocal coaching came. And I had a wonderful choir master, and he would say to me, you know, when you're going for that high note, lift your eyebrows. And I'm afraid that stuck with me fully. I obviously took that coaching on well and truly. So yes, I'm unfortunately aware of that phenomenon. But the thing is, when I'm on stage, I'm reading recently about performers who are lost in the experience when they're performing, and I hadn't thought about it again in quite such grand terms. But that is what happens. You know, my own experience of being in front of an audience is not really being a natural show-off, if you know what I mean, a natural performer. Let me give you an example. Robbie Williams, you know, obviously lives to be in that environment, and I suppose in some ways so do I. But I'm not a natural show-off in that way, and I get in front of an audience, and my own feeling is something better happen now. I've got to do something here that will entertain these people, and whatever I need to do to make that happen is what happens naturally. And unfortunately, my eyebrows seem to be a part of the deal.
Oh, sometimes I think they're going to take off, but it shows passion. It's great.
Yeah, you also know how to use the stage and how to entertain an audience. And from that, at Birmingham in December, for people that haven't seen Go West before, I'd like you to tell them what they can expect.
Well, we seem to have... there seems to be a preconception about the band in some areas, that we are a pop band, that we're not, to use someone else's word, credible. And in our defence, I'd like to say, you know, we're, what is it now, 26 years we've been doing this, making records, playing live. We are not a manufactured act. We came about as a songwriting partnership. For the most part, we've written almost all our material, and we've always been, as you've been kind enough to say, highly selective about the players that we use in our band. So, the two Birmingham shows that we're playing, the Robin on the 7th of December in Bilston and the Academy on the 21st, are both standing venues, and every time we play, we try to give the highest energy version of ourselves that we possibly can. It's despite the fact that we've had so-called pop success, we've always thought of ourselves as a rock band right from day one, and that's what we think of now. So obviously, the people that come to see us that are familiar with our career will expect to hear our so-called hits, and of course we'll be playing those. But we'll also be playing some new material from our current album, which is called 3D, and throwing a couple of surprises into the mix as well. For a long time we were playing U2's Vertigo, which went down a storm, but it's obviously that's a little bit of a while ago now. So we're currently looking around at what's current and finding a couple of covers that we can add our own twist to, and hopefully the people who are at these standing venues will be glad they're on their feet and have a great time.
Brilliant. Peter, before you go, something that I ask everybody that we interview. Are you ready for this question?
I doubt it, but fire away.
What's your favourite fish?
So my favourite fish to eat is tuna. How's that?
That'll do me nicely. Right, Peter, thank you very much. We're very much looking forward to the Birmingham gig. We shall see you there.
Pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.
And one of them's on my birthday.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Peter Cox.
Live on HFN on Kendall and Stu's Rock Friday Night Show.
Rock Friday Night Show?
Friday Night Rock Show.
I'll edit that
Even.
for you.
Yeah, you could.